Progressive Christianity promises change without loss, but for many people, the discomfort doesn't go away. In this episode tonight, we explore why softer theology doesn't always bring real freedom, and why the unease that started your unraveling may be pointing to something deeper. If you have an answer to this, give us a call.
What's up, Elliot?
Hey, welcome to a fresh episode of The Deconversionist, Alan.
Yes.
Where have you been for a week?
Where have I been for a week? Oh, I was having a debate of my own with Michael Miano. That was interesting and fun. Wish we had more time, actually, because there's so many more questions. And
so you've reconverted then?
No, no, I haven't. But maybe I would have if it was a little more clear as to how you get saved. I couldn't quite figure that out, which is some of the more questions I would like to pursue on. But unfortunately, the debate is over. So I guess all of that will have to happen behind the scenes if I can still get Mike talking to me. So here I am today. Fascinating. You keep wondering why I'm looking over here. I just found out moments before we went live that I have a pipe leak, a water leak here in my pipes. That's really sad. So now I got to fix yet another thing in my house. But that's
it's God trying to convert you again. Like somehow maybe that's the gospel you're looking for, or the sign you're looking for.
Maybe. Well, I figure if I just put my head under it, I'll get baptized, at least Presbyterian style, and maybe that'll take.
If the leak gets a lot worse, you might have to build an ark.
I may have to do that, or a baptismal pool. I don't know, man. So anyway, I'm going to stop looking over there because it's not going to heal by me staring at it. Sometimes if I was like Homelander or Superman, I could just, laser it. But
there you go. Yeah. Maybe in a universe where the supernatural was possible, that might be possible.
Maybe. While we are doing this little intro here and talking, I just remembered once again, as I forgot last week, I need to put the link in the comments. Link to Open Room. Here it is, folks, the link to the open room. And boom. If you want to hop in tonight to have a chat with us, we would love it. It is going to be pinned to the top of your screen. Hey, if you're a theist especially, we want to know, what did your version fix? Because, most Christians, and I did it too. Maybe you did. I don't know how far you went with this, Elliot, but I kept revamping my theology because I kept finding new verses that didn't fit the old theology, and so I had to keep modifying and fixing things, and then eventually I modified myself right out of Christianity. But maybe you have a version that you did as a Christian, just like I did, and just like every Christian I know does. But we're just curious what your version fixed. Let us know. For me, it was a lot of the time texts. That was a big one, and other things before that we can talk about as well. But for me, one of the biggest ones that I remember was realizing these time texts and the audience relevance, it just didn't fit any future model of Jesus coming back. So I had to square that. And at first I thought it fixed everything. And then, it had problems with the creation account. And then eventually it had problems with what that actually did for us and at all anyway, even if you did have Jesus come back. So anyway, it just created more problems. But nonetheless, it fixed some. So I want to know what version yours fixed. I don't know, Ellie, is that what you're interested in? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, of course I'm interested in that because, as we've been seeing, everybody has their own version of Christianity, and it's interesting that you started off tonight talking about how you asked Mike for his version of the gospel, and you got a response that was confusing. And just the gospel itself, we don't have to go any further into the Bible than just the gospel, and everybody has perhaps a slightly different definition of what that even is. So as a Baptist, I was confronted with like 4 different twists on how you got saved. And obviously, in order to be a Christian, you're going to have to pick one, because I don't know how anybody can hold more than one version of how they actually, come to Jesus and accept this salvation. So the first problem within the Baptist denomination is, are you a free will Baptist or are you a Calvinist? Now that really matters, because under free will, like, you have a free will choice. But under Calvinism or election or predestination, however you want to phrase it, like, you don't have a choice. It's called irresistible grace. God chooses you, and the pull is so irresistible that you don't have a choice but to come to the gospel. And then once you are saved as a Baptist, then you have other other options, like, have you completed the Salvation Act simply by believing? Where does repentance play in? Do you have to repent before you believe? Do those have to happen together? Or is faith alone sufficient? And then after that, do you get baptized? Does baptism, the act of baptism, does that complete the salvation process? I don't know. I mean, half of the Baptists say yes and half don't, or however you want to break it down. And then I had an elder in my church tell me that when he got saved, I forget where it is, but everybody knows the verse, you must believe in your heart and confess with your mouth. He believed that believing was only 50% of the way there. And in order to complete the salvation process, he had to go out and find a person and confess to them with his mouth before he could be fully saved. And he said that was the most stressful hour of his life, was driving the car, going to tell somebody, because he was afraid he might get in a traffic accident, die, and end up in hell before he was able to confess with his mouth. So just the gospel itself, the salvation process, is like your own version of Christianity. And like, you got to ask yourself, which one of those versions are you going to pick, and what problem is it solving?
Yep.
So what do you believe when you're a Christian? Like, how do you come to being like Jesus in your heart and you're on your way to heaven? What did you have to do?
Well, tonight I had to come up with a whole new version so that I can go to heaven, and that was switching our spots on the screen. So Jesus Exploration 7, nice to have you again with us tonight. He said, this is new. Alan now on the right and Elliot on the left. That's because I'm sitting closer to my pipe tonight. So
he's really keeping track. He's remembering what side of the screen we're on. That's keeping tabs.
It is new to me too now. As soon as I didn't notice it until they mentioned it, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so weird. So salvation, back to the gospel. So for me, it was somewhat simple. It was, you are a sinner and you have offended a holy God, and his wrath is against you, so that you will be punished for eternity, whatever that may look like, whether it's hell or whatever. That particular doctrine changed a lot through the years, but the core of the gospel didn't. That was the part that needed the gospel, was that you're a sinner and you're going to face the wrath of God forever. So the gospel was, Jesus died for your sins, according to the gospel, according to the scriptures, 1 Corinthians 15, and he rose from the dead on the third day, according to the scriptures. And that's as simple as that. If you believe those two things, you take those two things on faith, you're saved from the wrath of God. That's simple, because Christ's righteousness is then imputed to you, and you get to live forever. And no matter what you did after that, it didn't matter, because the righteousness of Christ was all God saw on your behalf. And of course, the idea was that created a changed life. And so that's when, after you become a Christian, it takes over in, ecclesiology, or in soteriology, as far as being a part of the church is concerned. You grow in Christ. And so you're no longer desiring to rebel against God intentionally, so you try to, you want to live a new life. It changes your heart, that whole thing. So even though it doesn't save you, it saves you to do good works. So there was the aftermath that obviously I would say produced good works, but those good works had no bearing on the salvation. It wouldn't have mattered if you were Hitler. If you repented, if you turned from your wicked ways and recognized that Christ alone was your salvation because he died on the cross and rose for you, that's it. You were saved. So to me, that was always the gospel message. I believed that from when I was a kid all the way through until I left full preterism. Like, that never changed. That to me seemed central to the Bible. I didn't have to redefine that in any way because it just seems so apparently clear from Paul in Romans chapter 1 Corinthians 15, and also Ephesians 2:8-9, and how you applied it by faith, by grace through faith. So to me, when I was debating Mike, faith to me was the method by which you applied the righteousness of Christ. It wasn't based on evidence. You just trusted something that you didn't have any justification for, but it didn't matter because if you're a sinner, you need a savior. So that's all you got. And your last desperate hope is Jesus. So it's like, well, okay, I'm going to do this because I need him. And as long as I believed I was a sinner, facing the wrath of God, I absolutely believed it because I was convinced I needed Jesus. So that was to me what the gospel was. And so now I'm hearing all these different versions of gospel and what it means. And now you have to apparently faith is being connected to the church. And I'm just like, I don't see how that squares with Ephesians 2:8-9. Mike's definition there didn't match at all. Later, he admitted that it's Ephesians 2:8-9 has a different definition of sorts. And now my head's spinning because I'm like, what? Okay, so how do you get to decide where to apply which definition of faith in the Bible? It was just all over the place, and I'm still struggling to grasp that. So if I'm a Christian, if I'm a non-Christian now, and I wanted to be saved, I don't even know how I would do that, because if it's not the version that I always trusted, now I'm confused as to what it is. So maybe you can help me, Elliot. What's the gospel now, or what was your gospel? I don't know.
Well, I think most Christians, of course, we've found that there is no average Christian, but I would imagine that most Christians would say that salvation is believing in Jesus and his sacrifice, him taking your sins and paying for them for you. But the devil's in the details, because it's clearly not that simple when you get deep into the Bible and you want to get into you go to seminary and you learn a lot about the doctrine of salvation. And it's so much more complex than just accept Jesus as your savior. A big problem for me while I was a Christian was dealing with Romans chapter 9. A lot of Christians live in fear that they're not saved. And every time they have doubts, which everyone has, or every time they sit through a sermon that's very convicting, they'll often wonder to themselves, well, am I really saved? And, we see people that are going through that salvation process, not once or twice, but throughout their life, maybe many times. It's a pretty average story to say that, I became a Christian when I was 5 or 7. I was in church and or I went home from church and I told my parents, I think it's time for me to get saved. And they go through that sinner's prayer. And then later on as a teenager, they become convicted again and they go forward in an altar call and they do it all over again. And then maybe as an adult, again, they become convicted. Maybe after learning more about, studying the Bible more, they come to the conclusion that, well, maybe I didn't fully understand it as a teenager. And so they do it the right way. And now they get down on their knees and they repent of their sins and they turn away from their sins. And, then they have this experience that convinces them, like I did as an adult, convinces them that, this was the first time I got saved, because now I'm going to really live it. Now I'm going to change my life. But the underlying, premise there is, they're afraid. They're afraid they didn't take the first few times. So you come to a chapter like Romans chapter 9, where it talks about, well, some people are only created for destruction. What right does the clay have to say to the maker, why have you made me like this? Like, maybe you are made for destruction. And then you get a whole nother round of doubting, where, well, maybe God did not elect me to salvation, and I'm just, faking it this whole time, like all these years, and I'm just not going to heaven. There's nothing I can do about it. And then they go through maybe an existential crisis, and it just keeps going around and around and around like this. What do you do? I don't think there's a way out of that for those Christians. They're going to live in that fear forever. Did you go through that phase where Romans 9 really bothered you and you wondered if you were just not chosen by God?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one question came from the floor. What tradition of Christianity were you a part of? Just curious. All of them, I think. at one point as I journeyed. Maybe I skipped a few, but man, I think I made sure I studied everything just to see what made the most sense. But at any rate, to answer your question, and then we got a guest in the room. So Romans 9, yeah, sure, it definitely caused me some angst a little bit, but it also gave me a lot of confidence in my salvation, because as a Reformed Christian from the Reformation perspective, the Calvinist perspective, I knew that there was nothing I could contribute towards my salvation anyway. And if God was going to make sure he saved me forever, I was going to be saved forever. And if he didn't, I wasn't going to be. And so it became one of these things where some Christians, that causes great consternation, where they spend a lot of time worrying if God saved them, if they're really saved. I drew a conclusion that there's nothing I could do about it anyway. So I stopped worrying about it. I simply trusted that I put my faith in him, and I lived out of joy for him. And I knew that I was living a great life regardless, because as long as you're living a life for the glory of God, it's the happiest life you can live. And I don't believe that now, obviously, but at the time, and because that was where my Christian hedonism came from. God is the object of my passion and my desire, my happiness. So I lived like that, and I just left it in God's hands because I couldn't change the outcome anyway. So I just didn't let it worry me. I just lived for his glory and just trusted that he had my best interests in mind. I don't know why I didn't have the stress about it. I just didn't. But I will tell you that I don't think very many of the Christians in my church felt like I did when I preached that message. I think it scared the shit out of a lot of them, because most of them had this great fear all the time. I'm like, well, then how do I know if I'm saved? And they were all worried. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, man. This doesn't worry me. It worries you. Sorry. So yeah, it was not exactly the same for everybody else. But anyway, we have a guest that came in the room. H, you want to pop your camera back on so we can bring you in? All right, here comes H. What's up, H?
How you doing, guys?
Hey, welcome to the show.
Good to have you with us.
Would you prefer that I leave the camera on, or does it matter if I turned it off and just talk to you guys?
We prefer if you leave it on.
Yeah, it's easier for us. We can have kind of a better, more personal conversation that way.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just on a stationary bike, so I didn't know if you wanted to.
No, we don't mind.
Better than riding in real life. That's much better, much safer.
True. Yeah, no, I just came across your page. I was listening a little bit to your story. I am a Christian, although I can relate significantly to your experiences. I went through a deconstruction phase for probably 5 years. And I had to unpack a lot of the stuff that was handed to me and question it, because kind of like what your title suggests, like, I think there's 40,000 denominations of Protestantism across the world, all appealing to the same scriptures and all claiming that they have the truth. And obviously that can't be true. So there's a significant problem. And so I think if anyone's being honest and thinking for themselves, they have to deal with that. And the reason I hopped on is because you guys seem really cool. Like I'm not trying to get into some argumentative, like, shouting match as some people like to do. I'm not interested in that, but
yeah, we're not interested in that either.
Good, dude. Good. So yeah, just wanted to see, we could have a conversation.
Absolutely. Well, let me just start by saying that it's not as bad as you may think. I know 40,000 gets tossed around a lot, and that's generally what people think is the case when the encyclopedia says it's of religion and Christianity says that it's 40,000. When you look at how they came to that conclusion, and I don't know why they did this. It's really confusing, but they count a denomination as another country actually having the same denomination as a different country. So like Presbyterian here in Argentina would still be considered a denomination, even though it's the same exact denomination. So I don't know why they did that. So they make it sound like it's 40,000 when actually it's closer to around 1,000, a little over 1,000 denominations. So it's still excessive, and still to your point. But but it's not quite as. But if we keep going, it's going to end up 40,000 someday. I'm sure of that.
Sure.
Well, my assumption, I was going to mention the 30,000 statistic earlier when we started, but I forgot. It was my assumption that they count sects of Christianity that have existed in the past. So it's a lot easier to inflate the numbers if you count ones that have existed and no longer exist. But the last I checked, I think there's something like 230 denominations of Protestantism that are currently active in the United States. So it's a much more manageable number.
Yeah, United States would be different than across the world. I think that's correct. But I've never went into like a deep study into what they classify as a denomination. But to your point, either way, whether it's 230, 1,000, 40,000, it's still problematic if anyone wants to give an honest critique.
Of course. And those 230 or 1,000 or 40,000, whatever it may be, all of them came from trying to resolve a tension that they saw and trying to make more sense of the Bible, because apparently where they came from didn't make enough sense of the Bible. And so there you go. And it's just continuous confusion. So I'm curious, you're here on the show on the particular problems that Christianity, your unique version fixed. So as you were journeying through where you are right now, what took you to where you are now? What did you see that was problematic that said, hey, I got to resolve this and move to where you are?
So it's a loaded question, but I'll be concise. Basically, I was grappling with the fact that I was dealing with real religious trauma. And I don't use that word lightly. Not everybody experiences religious trauma, but for me, as a kid, to be told that unless you say a prayer, there is a all-powerful being who is going to roast you alive for all of eternity, unless you do X, Y, Z, and oh, by the way, he loves you. It just never didn't make any sense to me, although I was conditioned to believe it, right? And so you do the best that you can to try to fit in the frame. And then I didn't realize how that had led to, in my 20s, a lot of anxiety that I was experiencing in my late 20s. By now, I was married, had a business, and I didn't understand why I was having nervous breakdowns, certain triggers, things of this nature. It's not only the religious trauma, but in my journeying, I realized that the very foundation, the bedrock of my identity is rooted in this tradition that, these beliefs about more or less me not feeling truly worthy of love, and how that tied directly to God. And so that's what started everything for me. I started questioning things like, I don't know, something is just off here. Something's not right. And I was always curious. I had never accepted like pat answers. You guys seem like really smart people. I don't know if you went to seminary or not, but it sounds like you weren't just like a Christmas and Easter Christian. You guys were really processing your faith, looking at things, doctrine, all these things. And so I'm very much the same way. I'm a deep thinker. I like to think for myself. And I just realized that ultimately I wasn't actually thinking for myself. I was just regurgitating the things that I had been taught. And so that didn't sit well with me. And then that led me onto the journey that I'm in now as a catechumen in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So we can unpack that a little bit more, but that hopefully answers your question.
So what were you before? If you're Eastern Orthodox now, what were you before, like when you had the religious trauma?
I was raised in a charismatic tradition. So Pentecostal, Jesus is coming back any minute. A lot of chaos. Not all bad. I don't want to sit here and paint everything with a broad brush. But the parts of it that were problematic really had a profound, impact on me. And so ultimately, the whole system is rooted in fear. If we just want to distill it in simple terms, everything ultimately is rooted in fear with a pitch and a facade of love. But I think, again, if you really give an honest critique of it, it's not. It's rooted in fear. So yeah, charismatic.
Did you can you give an example of one of the doctrines or fear-based teachings that you lived with, that you moved away from because you didn't want to live with fear-based beliefs, and tell us where you, like, was that belief or was that teaching rooted in the Bible, and how the Eastern Orthodox Church resolved that for you? Because I'm curious how the Eastern Orthodox squares a passage that's in the Bible and the other one didn't. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
My question?
Yeah, totally. Just before I get into that, are you guys familiar with Eastern Orthodoxy and the doctrines and the history of it at all, or have you guys?
Only briefly. Like,
okay.
I probably couldn't give you a very good definition, except, I know about the Great Schism. They split in what, the
1054? No, 1054.
Yeah. And it's kind of I guess in the context of American Christianity, it seems rather obscure and foreign of a denomination, but I know it's like having a resurgence now. I'm curious, before you go any further, when did you become Eastern Orthodox? Is that something that happened in the last 5 years or so?
Yeah. So to give you a little context, and this maybe will set the stage actually really nicely, set the table. You don't become Eastern Orthodox overnight. So for an Orthodox Christian, you go through a process, and that process starts as an inquirer. And then after you're an inquirer, if you have inquired and you feel like this is a commitment that you want to make, you become a catechumen. Then you go through that process, and then you're baptized into the church, and you become a member of the body of Christ. So it's very different. There's no sales pitch. There's no fear, hey, get up here. There's no altar calls. In fact, the church service, the best way that I could describe it, and I've heard it said, is at the center of every Protestant church, there's a stage. And on the stage is a pulpit, and on the pulpit is a Bible, and behind that pulpit and Bible is a man. And if we're, for me, I don't want to speak for you guys, but maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't. The success of that church is largely dependent upon the charisma and the giftings of that pastor. And there's also no hierarchy. There might be within certain sects, right? There are, Assemblies of God and Presbyterian, as you mentioned. So there is, you can have a board of elders and things like that. But when you go to other examples, like within the tradition that I was a part of, anybody could start their own church. I mean, you guys, if we got together and we put our heads together, there's nothing stopping us from going to start a church tomorrow. And so all we need is a Bible. And again, maybe we could be good at marketing, and we could be good at speaking. And you could run a pretty successful church that way, right? So within Orthodoxy, there is no stage at the center of the worship experience. There's an altar, and it's very liturgical. And the liturgy is from John Chrysostom. It dates back to the 4th century. So there's this ancientness that it has intact that's very unique, very, very unique, especially within Christianity, but I would say even outside of Christianity. So the process is, I was an inquirer. In fact, I've been on this journey for 5 years. In November, I decided to go to my first Eastern Orthodox church and attended a divine liturgy. And I was I had no reference point. There's no screens. There's no, first of all, it's beautiful. There's iconography all over the place, but there's no reference point in the modern world. And it was completely different than any church I'd ever set foot in. Even different than a Catholic church, very different from the West, because this is an ancient Eastern faith. And so, then I became a catechumen, which is what I am now. So I'm not technically an Eastern Orthodox. Christian, I'm going through that process and journey. But yeah, so I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, it does. Since we don't know a whole lot, like I don't know a whole lot about Eastern Orthodox. I don't know about Alan. Obviously, Alan was not one. What would you say if you're able to boil it down to what the differences, the key differences are versus mainline Protestantism? Like, because I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. So we can trace where Protestantism originated from, right? 16th century, Martin Luther. Everyone knows the story. Well, my question then would be, well, what were the early Christians doing prior to those 1500 years? And as you start to dive into the historical church, you see 90%, honestly, I don't want to grossly overestimate, but a lot of the doctrines of hell, ecclesiology, soteriology, eschatology, even theology, even the way that we understand the Trinity as compared to the Cappadocian Fathers or the early church, radically different. The way that we approach the Eucharist. So I would say the Catholic Church is closer to Orthodoxy, although we would say that the Pope was the first Protestant because we don't believe in the papacy. We don't have that structure. And it wasn't around. It wasn't existing for the first 1,000 years. It just wasn't there. So that was part of the schism. So the key differences would be, I mean, I don't even know how to begin to start, but we would say ultimately, when we're using words like salvation, we can all have the same vocabulary, but a different dictionary. For us, salvation is theosis. It is union with God. It is not like your Willy Wonka golden ticket where you say this prayer and you go to heaven, and if you don't, people go to hell. For us, the doctrine of hell itself is actually very different. So in the West, hell is separation from God. That's absent from the first 1,000 years. So like literally nobody believed that. Hades, Gehenna, the doctrine of hell is actually what started, it's what created the anxiety for me. I think one of you asked that question. And then it's what led me ultimately to Orthodoxy. And I'll just encapsulate it this way. For the early Christians and still to this day, hell, the doctrine of hell is the presence of God wrongly received. So there is no such thing as separation from God. How can something be separate from God and still even have existence? So I think in my view, I don't know how you guys would relate to this or not. But like the way that I viewed God was kind of like an object among objects, right? Like he's like more of like a Zeus type figure, and he's more powerful than all the other objects. Well, the Eastern view and the Christian view is God is not an object among objects. He's the very ground of all existence and reality. He is ultimate reality. And so nothing can be separated from God. And so therefore, hell, both the damned or the judged and those who have been quote unquote saved are in the presence of God. One receives that divine presence through the energies as love, and the other receives it as torment. And the best way to illustrate this is in the parable of the prodigal son. When the prodigal son returns to the father, he freely receives forgiveness despite all of his things that he committed in error, right? And so he's receiving the love and forgiveness of a loving father. At the same time, that same exact action, the elder brother, it causes him to go into anger and torment. He literally starts getting upset and say, why are you forgiving him? He doesn't deserve that. Hey, wait a second. How come you never threw me a party? So that same act of love, it sparked union in one relation and separation in another. And that's how we would view the doctrine of hell. I can give you another example, but I don't want to rant. I'm probably already talking too long.
So
it's very educational. I appreciate that.
So there's no eternal lake of fire in the Eastern Orthodox religion.
There is. You know what the lake of fire is? The
I
love
don't.
of God.
Let me
The
know.
love of God.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's if I'm not mistaken, this I think it was Jonathan Edwards, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," that talked about the torments not being being away from God, but being in the presence of God.
Yeah.
Because you're his enemy. So,
disgusting. Completely absent from the first 15 centuries of the Christian church. You get some of that they take Augustine way out of context, which, by the way, Augustine, who's the beloved father of the West, didn't read Greek. We still revere him as a saint, but this is opening up another can of worms. But bottom line is, yeah, that is absent from the church for the first 15 centuries. And honestly, I would go so far as to say that God, if that is true about the character and nature of God, that he literally delights in and plays with him, as Edward says, like a spider dangling over a flame, in this kind of sinister thing, you actually have a God who is morally inferior to Satan, because Satan was doing the right thing by rebelling against a tyrant like that. And so, yeah, that is completely absent from the first 15 centuries of church history. And and again, and I would go so far as to say, if that is God, I would not worship him. In fact, he's not worthy of worship. So that opens up the other question. What makes, like, I'll ask a Calvinist, what makes God worthy of worship? And they'll lean on the providence of God or his omnipotence or how sovereign he is. That's not actually what makes someone worthy, because then I'll follow up and say, okay, if Satan was sovereign, would he be worthy of worship? And they would say, no. Okay, so then what actually constitutes someone being worthy of worship? And ultimately, it's their love. That's what makes them worthy. Holy, right? Which just means to be separate, not like keeping a set of rules. So that's the other thing we can get into. Sin, even the concept of sin, is completely radically different.
Yeah. So from one of the things, if you were to ask me what would make God worthy of worship, the foundational thing prior to any other qualifications would be that he exists. So obviously, if he doesn't exist, there's nothing to worship. So what you have in Eastern Orthodoxy, perhaps, is a tradition that goes back further. Perhaps it resolves some of the issues of the Bible that make God abhorrent. There are still plenty of issues in the Bible that I would be interested in your take on, perhaps at another time, because there's a lot of Old Testament texts that make God out to be a pretty bad monster.
Yeah.
So those in themselves kind of deter from this good God that you're referring to. But how did you draw the conclusion that God is the ground of everything?
Logical necessity.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So you basically, no matter how far you go, no matter how many arguments they basically get comprised into, and I'm oversimplifying this, but one of two things. You either have a contingency, a universe that is contingent upon something else in an infinite regress, or you have, therefore you have a contingent phenomenon, or you have something that grounds all of reality. So for me, to have a contingency phenomenon does not explain or answer the question, why does anything exist at all, let alone how? So that's what I mean by, I would say, is a logical necessity, although that's an oversimplification of it. But for me, that's kind of where I would go.
How did you determine that it has to be one of those two options?
Can you think of another?
Sure. A non-grounding eternal existence of something that we don't understand or comprehend.
What do you mean by non-grounding?
Meaning that there's no intentional agent that is holding anything together or making things happen.
So it would be, okay, so they wouldn't have personal attributes. but they would still have ontological necessity, is what you're arguing.
Sure, but we may not even be aware of what they are.
Sure. Yeah, that would be exactly what I'm saying. It's still the same conclusion. It would just be not personal.
So then you would say that it is so then there is a great possibility that whatever has brought this universe into existence is not a personal agent like God.
You can argue, no, I would say that actually is more logical than having a contingency phenomenon.
Why does it have to be a contingency?
No, you're saying it would be non-contingent, right?
Possibly. I'm not saying what
it would have to be out of logical necessity. Otherwise, it's contingent upon something else for its existence.
Well,
so that's where.
Well, no, but the problem is, you're working within the boundaries of the laws of logic we have in this universe. So obviously, you can only draw the conclusions you're drawing because you only understand how this closed system works. And so you're basing everything you understand about prior to Planck time based on your understanding of the laws of physics in this universe. But we don't know what the laws of physics were like prior to Planck time, if there even were any. So we can't draw an either or scenario and say it has to be this or it has to be that, because we just can't possibly know.
Yeah, so it's actually a completely different category. I'm not speaking physics. This is more metaphysics. So things like,
because we don't know enough about, you can't possibly know what the metaphysics are prior to Planck time.
I think you can, because these are not concrete things that exist in time. They're the grounds for things to even exist at all. So for something to exist, you have to have preconditions that must be true in order for anything to have existence at all. That's why the ancient question of why does anything exist at all has been studied forever ad nauseum, because now you're delving into the metaphysics of something. Because for anything to have existence or reality, there must be some grounding, right? Like that, otherwise you cannot have existence at all.
But in that, let's just grant that there must be some grounding.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't tell us anything about that grounding.
You're correct. So you cannot reach the Christian God, if that's where you're getting to, purely through metaphysics alone. Although there's epistemic justification for it, it doesn't violate any laws or of logic or anything like that. But that would be a separate conversation. Although
you're right. It doesn't violate the laws of logic, but it violates the law of filling gaps with no good reason.
No, it's again. Well, let me ask you this: like, are you inferring that in any universe prior to the one that we currently abide in, that it is a possibility for something to exist and be a logical contradiction? Can it have existence? In other words, can in any other universe, can there be a square circle?
Maybe, because again, if the laws of physics don't apply in that universe that they do here, we can't possibly know what it's like.
But that's not a physics question. That's a metaphysics question. So, like for example, if we're talking about reality, right, or existence, like you said at the beginning, in order for God to even be worshipped in the first place, he must exist.
Correct.
Otherwise, forget what anyone else says, right? Like it doesn't even matter. So we're now arguing for the existence of something. And we could say, okay, the existence of the universe or the existence of God, the existence of logic, the existence of beauty, the existence of love. These things exist. We all acknowledge them. And we're trying to, by asking these metaphysical questions, ascertain how do they exist? Why do they exist in the first place? And so you can say, hey, look, in some other parallel universe, we can have a square circle. But A, you wouldn't be able to ground that. It would be pure assertion. And
I didn't say we can have it. I said, how can we know?
And that's the point. So you can say that, hey, how could we know that there in some other parallel universe we could have a square circle? You can posit that possibility, but we have no reference for that in reality. That's the point.
Well, so no, exactly. But you know what else we don't have a reference for in reality? Another universe to compare this one to dictate that this was somehow created.
Yeah, but this is why I think that it's a category error. It's not a one-to-one correlation, because I'm not asking, like when somebody asks the question, why does anything exist at all? They're not actually asking a physics question. You can't, like science can't answer that question. Science is observable, right? Or you're an empiricist, or science takes what it can observe and go through a model to try to explain why things do what they do or how, right? But this is not a science question.
Well,
this is a philosophical.
We just know that it can't answer it yet.
No, like can science prove logic exists?
I don't know if it can. Right now it can.
It can. No, it can't. Because logic is logic an abstraction, or is it concrete?
I would say it's, well, that's a tough question. Elliot, what do you think of that answer? I don't know.
Well, it would have to be an abstraction of sorts. I mean, the laws of logic don't exist in the same way that a physical object would exist. They're tools that we have essentially discovered or created in order to function in a way that's consistent in our universe.
So you think logic was?
Well, it's kind of like mathematics. Like mathematics is a language that works, and it's gone through a lot of changes to make it work. I wouldn't say that it's a discovery.
So you think that logic was created?
No, because it's I would say maybe discovered. Well, it's a tool, like you discover any tool.
We formulate it,
and it works as far as we can tell.
We formulate it into math. Yeah, I mean, you take what the universe gives you and you formulate it into facets that you can put into words.
Yeah,
but then really the bottom line though is that no matter how far back you want to press this, when you get back to the very beginning, as far back as we can tell, we have no grounds to leap to God and say, "Hey, He's the only possible explanation for this," because you cannot know that. You can guess that, and you can say, hey, this is one logical option, and it's the best one we have right now. That's fine, but you still can't say, therefore, it is true. All you can do is say it's the best we have right now, but it's not a good enough reason to conclude that.
I understand your point, but I think that you're still trying to mix two categories that don't mix, like science with reality. Science observes reality, but doesn't ground why reality exists in the first place.
Sure.
That's an entirely separate.
I know.
It's apples to Volkswagens.
We don't know why we're grounded in reality. You're guessing and saying it has to be a God.
No, it's not. It's not guessing. It's when you delve into the separate categories. So we're not talking about temporal things, like as far back as you can go, as if in time, like, oh, here's this point of origin, and then this is where it began, like the Big Bang. We're talking on a whole different plane of conversation. So it'd be like trying to add yellow plus red. It's like these things, you can mix them, but they're not mathematical numbers, right? So my point that I'm making is, it's not a guess of like, oh, well, I'm reaching the best logical answer that we have at our disposal now to explain how something or anything can exist at all. That's why I said, if you go down all the schools of thought, or just, again, using logic, like, again, how is it that we're even having a conversation right now? We're using our reasoning faculties. I'm formulating words. You're listening to me. You're responding to me. what is connecting our minds? If my mind is just gray matter and my thoughts and my experiences just are limited to my head, how is there any interaction with reality? That opens up a whole nother can of worms, because there must be something that grounds all of this together out of logical necessity.
Oh, yes. Nobody's arguing that that's probably the case, but we still don't have the answer to that. And you can't just say because logic demands there is something, logic demands it's God. That's a
that big leap. Is that a logical claim that you're making, or is it illogical?
What? Which claim?
The claim that you can't know. You can't say.
Okay, let me correct that. Currently, we don't know. I shouldn't say we can't know, because it's possible we will eventually, but we don't know now.
How do you know?
Ellen doesn't know, and I don't know. People do claim to know, but we're not convinced that they actually know. So is grounding itself a law of logic?
No, logic, in order for anything to exist, like logic, like beauty, like love, like me, like you, in order for anything to have existence at all, it must be contingent on something that is non-contingent. This is where you get this idea of the uncaused cause. There has to be something, in order for anything to exist, it must be non-contingent. Otherwise, it's contingent, and therefore it has a cause. And therefore you could only believe one of two things. Either ultimately there's a grounding for existence, something that is non-contingent. Before, I'm not even saying it must be the Christian God. It could be whatever, aliens, eternal being, like it could be whatever we want to say right now. It could be a little pulse in the corner of the universe that's emanating all life from itself. It could be whatever. But before we get to that question, we must establish that it is of logical necessity to have grounding. Existence must be grounded in a non-contingent, in something that's non-contingent. Otherwise, it's illogical. That's the point.
No, because even though we assume the uniformity of nature and we assume that everything we have now in logic is going to stay the way it is because it's grounded, we don't know that that's the case. You're still making an assumption that tomorrow we're not going to wake up and it's going to change. You're still making an assumption that we're not brains in a vat. Like, these are things we don't know. And so you have no way of determining that things are actually grounded.
So then how can you know anything at all?
You can't, in my opinion.
So
I shouldn't even say that. Again, I'll correct that. Currently, I think my opinion is we can only maximally be certain. I don't know if we can be absolutely certain because I haven't yet figured out how to be absolutely certain.
Do you know that
Christians claim to be absolutely certain, and I'm wondering what the method is they're using to measure that certainty.
How do you know you could be maximally certain?
Well, I think that's a fair statement to say, because I can be certain with the information that I have, so I'm maximally certain. I'm as certain as I possibly can be with what I know.
How do you know that?
Well, I don't. That's why I'm maximally certain. I can only be maximally certain.
No, but you're making an assertion that you're maximally certain. So are you certain that you're maximally certain, or are you uncertain?
I'm only maximally certain.
Okay, but are you certain that you're maximally certain, or are you maximally certain that you're maximally certain?
I'm uncertain about that.
So I'm uncertain. So are you certain that you're uncertain, or are you uncertain that you're uncertain? I don't mean to be facetious or play
I understand what word game you're trying to play, but the point is, like, that's why I use the qualifier of maximally, because as soon as you start saying you definitively can't know everything, then now you're making a claim that's impossible to defend.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't say I know everything. Well, I don't think any. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you know the being that knows everything.
No, I'm just saying. Well, I believe that, yes, and I have an epistemic grounding for why I believe that.
That's what we want to know. I want to know what your epistemology is that gives us the measurement for how you determine this is God.
And well, that's why that's the argument that I was making, is that in order for anything to exist at all, for anything like reality, for us, either we're real or we're not. And even if we're not real and we're having this experience, there is something real. So ultimately, it's got to be grounded in something non-contingent. And that's why I said the argument for it is out of logical necessity. That's not the only way, but we're speaking logically. So if we're speaking illogically, then it's just gibberish. like our words have no meaning. It doesn't mean anything what we're
I'm
going to say.
I'm going to fast forward the conversation and advance it to the place where I'll say, hey, for the sake of argument, I'm going to grant to you everything you're saying. I'm even going to grant to you that somehow you get us to a God. I'm wondering how you measure that it is your God. How do you test this to verify that it is your God? How did you come to this conclusion?
Yeah. Well, now you're asking personal for me. I would say that's a separate question altogether. For me, I would say it's based on scripture, tradition, and reason. And ultimately, there must be epistemic grounding for truth. Even that scripture, tradition, and reason has to be rooted in something that's true, right? So again, we get back to the epistemology issue at hand. So for me, I think that we have to implore our reasoning faculties must be at play, and you have to incorporate logic. Again, because if you don't, then you're making an illogical argument, which is a circle, doesn't even make any sense. Your words have no meaning. It's reduced to gibberish. So I think that my experience, the scratch that I need, the itch that I need scratched in terms of making sense of the universe, all of that, I've come to the conclusion that it cannot be anything other than a Trinitarian being. So that's what I would say.
Okay. So let's grant that. It's a Trinitarian being. I still don't see how you got to... I'm assuming Yahweh is your God?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm still trying to figure out how you got to Yahweh.
How I got to Yahweh, or how can I logically argue that it is Yahweh?
Why? I would imagine that they're both the same, because if you got there, you must have used reason to get there, right?
Yeah, but I could be wrong, right?
Could you? Is it possible you're still wrong?
Yeah.
Interesting. How can you be wrong if you know God personally?
How can I be wrong? Oh, wrong. Sorry, I thought you meant wrong about it being Yahweh or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because I would assume you would claim you know him personally, right?
Well, he hasn't made that statement yet.
No, I know, but I'm asking him. I'm assuming.
Do you believe you have a personal relationship with Yahweh?
I believe we all do.
And how did you come to that conclusion that you have a personal relationship?
So I want to make sure that I'm not answering the question that you're not asking. When you say having a personal relationship with God, what do you mean by that? Just so I understand.
Well, I think the onus would be on you to describe your own personal relationship, because I have no idea what that's like for you.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm asking, like, what would you constitute as a personal relationship?
I would say that you know them intimately, like not sexually intimately, but intimately, like in a personal way. You talk to them, you know facts about them genuinely. You're so certain that they exist because you see them on a regular basis. Like my wife, there's no way in hell you could convince me she doesn't exist. I am 100% certain she exists. There's no fucking way you could convince me otherwise. In fact, I'm pretty sure Elliot's convinced that I have a wife, and he's never even met her. I don't even think he's ever seen her. And yet,
because it's not an extraordinary claim at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would like to have kind of like my father. He's genuinely my father. God used to be my father. He's not my father anymore because I don't think he exists anymore. But my father, I could tell you things about him. I know he exists, and he's different now even than he was when I was younger because he had an injury, a brain injury, and now he lost some capacities. But he's still my father, and I could genuinely describe him to you. And I'm pretty sure both of you would believe that I have a father and that I know him personally. So I'm asking you for details about how you know that you know God personally.
I think I'll answer that question, but I just want to establish this principle that I believe you, but there's no way that you could prove to me that your father existed. it would require some degree of faith on my part.
So you think it had a virgin birth?
No, I'm just saying you can't.
That doesn't require faith. Then everything evidentiary says that everybody has a father.
No, what I mean by that is that the father that you said was your father actually is your father.
Oh, sure, but if we really wanted to do this because we were trying to make this absolutely firm, we can get together. I can take you to my father. I could give you the DNA records. We can do a blood work. Doctors can demonstrate it to you. Go with me all the way there in your mind and tell me that I could not prove it's my dad.
Well, I'm not asking you to prove or demonstrate in any way that you have a personal relationship with God. I'm just asking for you to describe what that relationship is like for you.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah, that's why I wanted to get clarification on it. Thank you. What is that relationship? What is my relationship with God? I think, the lived experience of prayer, of participating in the liturgy, the church, having conversations with you guys. I believe anytime I witness anything, nature, beauty, the transcendentals, love. I have a 4-month-old baby. When I'm experiencing these things, I'm experiencing God. And because these things transcend any other normative expressions or experiences that I can't account for. So like love, for example, is not logical. You can't argue it based off logic. It's a different category, and it has a different existence. And so, yeah, I would say anytime I would reduce it, not reduce it, but I would distill it into the love, the ability to love my family, having conversation with you guys.
All right, so would you say then that your experience that your relationship with God is based on your experiences that you have? You are taking it on faith that God is present in those experiences with you.
I wouldn't say that I'm taking it based off of faith. I would say, although I wouldn't vehemently disagree with that, but that would not be a faith category, because in that sense, they're real experiences. There's nothing for me to...
Oh, I'm not denying your experiences. I'm asking you how you know God's present in those experiences.
How do I know God is present in those experiences? Well, then that would go back to the other question. Now we're on our epistemology question. I know I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's a logical necessity.
No, it's a logical necessity that I granted that it's a God. I'm asking you, how did you come to determine that your God is present with you in your circumstances, in your experiences?
It's a logical necessity.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we might have lost him.
He might have biked his way right out of the conversation because
right at the high water mark.
Yeah.
Well,
I think he's trying to come back. Okay. He hasn't left. He's still there.
I assume he can still hear us unless he's having internet problems.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. You now. Oh, you might be having internet issues there.
Can you hear us? We see you talking. Can you hear us? Give us a thumbs up if you can hear us.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, now we can. Okay, you're good?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we hear you for a second, and then you're gone again. Maybe try closing out and reconnecting.
I think maybe all the cyclists around him were getting tired of hearing about Yahweh. Like, shut this guy down. He's going to call back. I'm sure.
Okay,
that's fine. But yes, I think we need to. I think keep pressing them on faith is.
Yeah, we got to the grounding argument very fast, didn't we?
Yeah, that's really where we need to be, because all the other stuff is peripheral.
Yeah, and I mean, if he comes back in, I do want to ask him, like, if this is a key tenet of the Eastern Orthodox position, because it's one of the few types of Christians that as soon as they tell me that they're Eastern Orthodox, I know it's going to get to that grounding argument. It's inevitable.
Sure.
And I mean, I've never actually been able to talk about the Bible with somebody of that particular denomination.
Sure. Well,
we get right to philosophy.
Unfortunately, what was his name?
Just H.
Went by H. Anyway, I like H. I mean, he's very friendly and one of the only Eastern Orthodox persons I've ever been able to talk to this long.
Looks like he's back. Okay, perfect.
Hey, you're back, man.
Sorry, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good now.
I got a call and then it just booted everything.
That happens. I heard it happened to someone else last week. That's weird.
Yeah, that used to happen to me when I was doing this on my phone. It's a real problem.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say before we move on, I really enjoy again this civil discourse. So thank you for being hospitable.
No problem.
I was just commenting before you came back on that we appreciate you as well. I got to tell you, like most Eastern Orthodox people we talk to, they're by 3 minutes in, we're already fighting. Like it's impossible to have a conversation. So,
well, I want to ask you this because every time I've talked to somebody of the Eastern Orthodox faith, it goes straight to the philosophical grounding argument, and I'm wondering if that's something that is like a special thing with that denomination. I've never been able to actually talk about like the Bible with somebody from that faith.
Oh yeah, we can talk about the scriptures if you want.
No, I'm just wondering if that's like a key apologetic to that particular faith.
So that's a good question. I wouldn't say it's a key apologetic in it directly, meaning like we get like trained to like have these conversations and then to like go. We don't proselytize, just so you know. Like you're never going to see an Eastern Orthodox person like in downtown, telling you to turn or burn.
Right.
It's not a thing that we do. But baked into the tradition, it is steeped deeply in metaphysics, theology, and the grounding for why we do what we do. So it's indirectly an apologetic, but if you think about it this way, like, are you guys familiar with the Nicene Creed?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the Orthodox Church that produced that. 318 bishops came together and had to defend the Arian position, and they did so by arguing metaphysics and scripture. So we don't have like a Protestant view of the scripture, like sola scriptura. We don't have that as a frame of like, we just use the Bible to argue everything. For us, the church existed prior to the New Testament and is a product of the church. And so it requires the church to properly understand what the scriptures mean. And there's not like this private devotion thing, but baked into that, the 7 ecumenical councils, they appealed massively to metaphysical arguments because the claims against that they were making were metaphysical claims, heresy like Arianism, Nestorianism, things that they had to deal with. So yeah, they were deeply entrenched. And you got to remember too, at the birth of Christianity, I mean, you had a Hellenized world, right? So the Greeks had a massive influence in the world, massive. And so you get, a lot of that, like even the word, like in scripture, right? The New Testament was written in Greek. These are Jews. And they're using words like logos. They didn't invent that word. That was, deeply instilled in Plato and Aristotle. They used these same things. So yeah, I would say the scripture itself, Christianity as a tradition itself, is deeply entrenched in metaphysical, arguments and ideas.
Right. It's just not something that I often hear from American Protestants. Like when we first started doing this call show, like a month or so ago, like one of our first callers was Eastern Orthodox, and he was clearly from the debate sphere. And like he right away hit us with, well, what's your grounding? I'm like, well, that's not even the topic tonight. And I'm like, I'll totally admit to you, man, like I don't have a grounding like you have. Yeah. And that makes it, a bit difficult. Like I come to the table with some presuppositions, like I think, therefore I am. And and the laws of logic are also my presuppositions, but I don't have a grounding for the laws of logic. And I'm not convinced that there is a grounding. So I'm obviously at a disadvantage. if I have to provide one. So I see that in the debate sphere all the time. It's like, well, this is the checkmate, because you don't have grounding. Well, hey, but like, what am I supposed to do?
I hear you, and I think if you're an honest, and I believe you are, but if you are willing to go down the rabbit trail and say, well, wait a second, if I don't have a grounding for my arguments, how can I have no justification. I'm basically just giving my subjective opinion.
Well, I ground them in the laws of logic. It's just, I can't go back further than that.
And that's what I mean is, are you guys atheists or agnostic?
Both.
Yeah.
One of each, or you would say like they mean the same thing?
It could be both.
How can you enlighten me on that?
Well, agnosticism is a knowledge claim. Atheism is a belief claim. Like, I don't believe there's a God, but I also don't have knowledge of a God. So I'm an agnostic atheist.
Would you be the agnostic part? Would that leave room for you to be convinced of a God, or is the belief side more like?
If I don't currently believe in a God, and I also don't have knowledge of one. So if I were to be provided knowledge of one, then I might believe in one.
Got it.
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense.
I think they work like best friends. I don't think you can honestly separate them, though I think people try to. But I think, as Elliot explained, your knowledge leads to your conviction. So yeah, I think they work hand in hand.
Yeah, no, that actually makes sense. I appreciate you explaining that.
I used to believe in God, and I used to believe I had knowledge of one.
Yeah, me too.
I'm no longer convinced of that.
Yeah, that's where.
But in your defense, I was a pastor of one of those churches that we just started up with a group of people. but I wasn't charismatic or good enough at marketing to grow the thing very fast.
Dude, that's awesome.
Hey, guilty, man. You got me.
Bro, this is it, dude. And we don't even realize, I heard it said once, and it made sense. Like, if you took scuba gear and you could communicate, let's say like you're Dr. Doolittle, right? And you took scuba gear and you jumped into the ocean and you started talking to a shark and you said, hey, the water here is like really cold. And their response might be, what water? Right? Like, they don't have a reference for the things that you see. And so in the same way, we have no idea, most of us, why we believe what we believe. We think that we're thinking for ourselves, but I would posit that you and I, neither of us have ever had an original thought. We are simply, at some level, all behavior is learned behavior, and all of the ideas that we carry did not originate with us. So it's a really fascinating thing for me to consider that, because I would say, hey, look, yeah, I'm convinced of this school of thought. I didn't make this up. And just like you guys are not like making up something new that nobody else ever thought of, right? So
that's exactly, I don't want to interrupt you, but just to interject real quick, that's exactly why I don't believe in a God. Because the only things that I know about this God are coming from the people around me. They're coming from spokespersons of this God. I'm not convinced that if I was born on a desert island and fed no information at all about this God, that I could come to the knowledge of that God on my own.
Let me ask you this. Why do you think human beings, for whatever reason, regardless of race, religion, time period, whether it's the 1st century or 5000 BCE, like, what is it in humans that have this orientation for something divine? What do you think that is?
Lack of scientific development. That's what. And then I think it just carried through the centuries, and now it's become a brainwashing phenomena.
I think it's hyperactive agency detection. So if we evolved as some kind of, entity in nature, like, we had to detect agency as a survival mechanism, or we would be like killed immediately. And so we have this superstitious mind has evolved in us to see agency behind like everything that moves. And it's not a very large leap to start imagining, forces like At one point, we didn't even know what the wind was. Like it's just it comes naturally to us that there's something around us doing things that we're not aware of. And as time goes by, you make up stories about those things, and those things turn into entities and, supernatural. It doesn't seem extraordinary at all that we would make up gods by the hundreds.
And yet, ironically, as science has advanced, we have taken away from God more and more because we've come to realize, hey, that lightning doesn't come from God. It doesn't come from Zeus. So I think that as we develop in science, eventually we're going to have no need for God. And I think that was, in a lot of ways what Nietzsche was getting at, and why he was afraid of nihilism, because it was going to get to a point where everybody was going to be like, well, God's dead. We don't have any use for him anymore.
So would you consider yourself a nihilist?
I don't know. Maybe by strict definition, I would have to be, but by functionality, I'm really not. I don't live my life like that in any way. I'm actually a very happy person. I really enjoy my life. And frankly, I don't fear death at all anymore. Like to me, it's brought me fresh air. I know a lot of atheists, that's one of the things that bugs them the most, is this idea that they're just going to die. To me, I'm like, I guess living as a Christian my whole life and always having this concern about the afterlife. Now I'm just like, hey, I don't have to worry about it, because number one, even though I didn't believe in a hell as a Christian, I was never 100% sure. I was like, well, maybe there's some eternal punishment, whatever. But now I'm like, I have no reason to think there's anything like that at all. So I'm just content to just die, and I won't have to worry about what it's like, because when I'm dead, I'm dead. I didn't worry about it before I was born, and I won't worry about it after I die. So now I just live my life and live at whatever I want to do. And I've got great goals and meaning for myself, and I drive my own purpose, and I no longer have a dictator telling me what my purpose is. I get to do whatever I want. And so I love life now more than ever. So it's hard for me to say that I'm a nihilist because of my optimism. But Elliot, do you want to answer?
Well, I'll be honest. I've struggled with nihilism, and I don't necessarily think it's a healthy mindset, because people will fall into that when they realize there's no ultimate meaning or purpose, and a lot of people aren't able to come up with their own meaning and purpose. And so they just kind of spiral down into nihilism, and obviously that doesn't make for a very happy or productive life. So this is one thing that, and I was atheist during high school,
and I just I would say the same thing as you. Like, okay, one could reach the conclusion, or say, look, I'm agnostic. There's no evidence or reason for me to believe this. So I don't know if there is, but there's no solid proof that that I'm wrong. So I'm just going to do me and kind of live my life. But then in some mysterious way, we live our lives with borrowed from some of these precepts that are grounded in religion or ethics or morals. So I'm curious.
I cannot. Sorry, I don't think I agree with that at all. Can you explain? Give me an example.
Yeah. Well, just like you said, there'd be no reason for you to even want to pursue being happy. There'd be no reason for you to want to be married. Well, no logical reason. There's no logical reason for that.
Yeah, there is, because I want to be happy. It's logical in itself.
How does logic and emotion, how can you give a logical argument for why people want to be happy?
Just because, okay, I'll give you a different example then. Just because my car will eventually die and be of no use to me doesn't mean it doesn't have use. Oh, shit, he's gone again. You got another call.
Well, Ellen, I would probably separate logic from emotion myself. I think that we pursue dopamine, serotonin, certain things that make us feel better. We have to pursue those. For example, he's in the gym right now. He's pursuing endorphins. It's making him feel good. That's not necessarily logical, but he is compelled to do so. Just like you're compelled to get married and pursue happiness because it makes you feel good.
But what's logical about that is everything medically tells us that if you're healthy, you live longer.
But you're not really thinking that way when you're doing it, though. Necessarily.
I beg to differ. I would. That's the only reason I would ever do it.
Well, you didn't think about it first, though.
Think about what? Do what? Well, like when I go to the gym, literally, I hate working out. It's completely logic driven when I go to the gym or when I do a fucking push up in the morning.
When pursuing, let's say, pursuing marriage, for example, did you make a logical decision based on all these different, precepts, like, hey, this is going to make it better, or what have you, or did you just fall in love and just pursue that because it felt great?
Well, the marriage part was completely logic based because it was just well, we got two H's and okay, there we go.
That was weird.
Because it had
every
everything.
Time I get a call, sorry,
it had everything to do with the government. Like we have better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good. You're back.
It's better to live.
Sorry, what were you saying, brother?
I'll come back to that another time. What's that?
I think you're muted, Alan.
I am. No, I'm not.
Well, I can hear you. You're good. I can hear both of you.
Oh, I can't hear Alan at all. I can hear you, Elliot.
Test 1, 2. Elliot, can you hear me?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You can hear him? I can't hear him.
Huh. Well, when you came back in, there was a duplicate of you that I removed from the room, which is really weird.
Oh, I remember. Interesting.
You want me to try to hop off and hop back in to see?
Yeah, let's try it one more time.
All right, one sec.
Anyway, for medical reasons, we got married officially because it just made sense because financially we were living better married than we were just dating. But as far as getting together, for me, it's hard for me to remember back to my first marriage. I couldn't possibly. I'd have to, and not reconcile data memory in itself would not make me trust my reasons. But with Ray, for me, it was a logical reason too. I knew that I was happier being with somebody than alone, so I wanted to be with somebody. Now, I didn't use logic to choose her. I fell in love, so I don't know if you drive that, then I'm not sure I can go any further than that. But sure. I mean, I intentionally got on apps and looked to date. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't just walking down the street and fell in love.
Well, you were compelled to do that. Were you actually making a logical choice to pursue marriage?
Yeah, I mean, sure, if you want to call that compelled, but I guess it's not. It wasn't an illogical choice. Maybe I should say it that way. There was nothing. I didn't lack any logic in me saying, "Hey, I think I'm going to date somebody again." It wasn't mindless.
Well, your biology was driving you to pursue that on some level.
Well, isn't everything that? I mean, my brain.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Guys, yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
We are 3 men here, grown men. You're telling me it's logical to be married to one woman?
No, I didn't say that.
Biologic? Yeah, because I don't know if there's something wrong with my biology. But
no, I didn't say that. That's just unfortunately that's just the culture we live in, and you decide to be with somebody, and that's the way they want it, and you kind of live by the rules. It's unfortunate, but
we don't have a choice right now.
Yeah,
we have no, dude.
Unless we convert to Mormonism, that's something that the Mormons have to offer that maybe your denomination does not.
Bro, that's how you know it's man-made. What man? Let's get this straight. What man is going to be like, hey, I'm going to put this in a book that you're commanded to marry one person, and if you cheat on that one person, you're going to get stoned to death. Like, what idiot would think about that? Because everything in my biology would be like, hey, yeah, God told me I could have multiple wives. God told me when I die, I'm going to have 70 or whatever virgins. Like, that to me sounds like something a dude would write. I don't know about you.
Right.
Well, we have plenty of examples from the Bible of guys that were not monogamous in any possible way, and none of them were judged for it.
Right. I don't know how a guy read that. That's not that's hard for me to believe a guy would write that.
So let's actually unpack the scripture now, if we could.
In fact, I would even argue that Paul in 1 Corinthians, what is it, 7? I think it is, where he's arguing about the being with one wife, and then if you divorce or whatever. I actually, it's been a while since I've looked at it closely, but I actually believe that Paul was arguing for polygamy in that chapter, which is completely opposite of what most people teach. But I do believe it's a strong case. Of course you don't, but I'm saying, like, I think you can make a strong case for that from that chapter.
If you know what the truth is, gentlemen, I could preach. You know this, Alan, if you were a pastor. Elliot, were you a pastor? Did you go to seminary or?
I went to Bible college, but I did not actually preach anything.
I think that all of us are smart enough that we could take the Bible and I could preach whatever God you want. What do you want? You want a racist God? I can do that. You want homosexual God? I can do that. I can preach whatever God you want.
The only God you can't get out of the Bible is a moral God.
I can get that.
I don't know about that, but
I mean, you get what I'm saying, though. Like, you can preach anything out of the scriptures. This is why sola scriptura, it collapses. It doesn't make any sense. And this is what led me to Eastern Orthodoxy, because, you know, when you have a text and you have this, like you said, Alan, before, you're like, I don't have a dictator telling me what I can or can't do. You've actually become your own dictator, right? Like, I don't have anybody telling me what to do. I'm going to do what I want to do whenever I want to do it.
Sure.
So,
and of course that becomes, you limit yourself at times, like to the conversation about my wife. Like, I could have chosen anybody and had a different type of life if I wanted to.
Yep.
I want to be with her.
Can.
Well, no, I can, yes, but this is what I'm choosing. I want to be with her, and these are the rules of our relationship, and that's just the way it goes. And I'm fine with that because it's what I'm choosing. So, you know, regardless of how many options there are out there, you can't get everything you want. You got to sometimes choose between them.
Yeah. No, I don't deny that. But I think that going back to like the scripture piece, this is in fact the problem is you pick up a text. Going back to my analogy about the shark in the water, you have no idea that 90% of the reasons why you could even believe what you believed when you were going to Bible college and all of this stuff literally had an indirect consequence because of something called the separation of church and state and something called the printing press. Like, do you understand, for 1,500 years, you couldn't just take this book and study it for yourself and go and draw conclusions. Most people were illiterate. That was only for the elite. You had to be a part of a liturgical community in order for you to even come into contact with something like this, because we didn't even have a printing press. So the luxuries that we have and the presuppositions are so deeply ingrained, we don't even think about these things. And how we were affected culturally and all these things in the West, scholastically, how we think, how we reason, all of these things are deeply embedded in things that we say that we just presuppose to be true. But, you know, few of us actually question, how do I know how can I discern what is actually true and what is not? And that's why, you know, ultimately it has to come back to epistemology or philosophy.
But you did have to choose to become Eastern Orthodox. I mean, ultimately, correct, you're still going to be the arbiter on some level. And I'm curious why you didn't choose Catholicism instead, because they also have the church authority aspect.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, you're 100% right. That's why, if you remember what I said, it's like a three-legged stool. What I use now to derive doctrine as a Christian, because we're talking about like doctrine of hell and certain things, is scripture, tradition, and reason. So let's focus on tradition, because that's a question that you're asking. Why didn't I choose Catholicism? Well, that's easy choice for me. When you look at history and you can draw the origin of when Roman Catholicism started. You already said it, 1054, Rome branched off from the Church of the East, from Orthodoxy. Up until then, there was one church for 1,000 years.
But wouldn't the Catholic Church say the same?
They would say the same thing, yes. But you asked me why I'm not convinced of Roman Catholicism. And so, you know, and we can get into the arguments of that, but, you know, the filioque, I don't know if you've unpacked that or know what that means. The papacy, you have no reference for that for the first 1,000 years, papal authority, indulgences. This is why actually Protestantism was birthed, because it was the logical conclusion from papal authority. And then you get this dictator kind of a thing, and now you have this control power, this pope, who speaks ex cathedra and defines all things dogma and all these things. And this is why Holy Orthodoxy said, no, you are teaching something that was never part of the apostolic deposit of faith. And so for me, we can go back to history and read the apostles, the disciples of the apostles. We have their writing. You can go on Amazon right now. The ancient church is replete with literature. I mean, you could spend your whole lifetime reading the authors and lives of the saints, and you could trace what they actually taught and believed, and you will not find any papacy in there whatsoever. You'll find the term Pope, but Pope just meant father, right? So everything was ran in the church ecumenically, like a council. That's why the Council of Nicaea was drawn. It was 318 bishops came together to say, hey, this is what the apostles taught us. And they ironed that out, and then they ironed out what the creeds are.
So I want to try to get us full circle again before you lost your call. But so fine, you have your reasons for choosing Eastern Orthodoxy. Great, and I can totally understand why you would. Makes sense. But what I'm still trying to nail down is that you still chose the path of a religion. Chose the path of a denomination in that religion. And all of that is because you already started with the presupposition that God exists. And so you simply were looking for the denomination that made the most sense of God for you. And so I still want to go back to why you ended up choosing God at all. Why did God, and then why it's Yahweh? Because before we back it up to that first question I just asked, I want to get back to where we were, because I already granted, for the sake of argument, that it's some creator and it's even a God, whatever. I still want you to explain how you determined that Yahweh is present, the triune Yahweh, specifically Yahweh, the Bible Yahweh, is present in all of your experiences, and how you know that he actually exists if your relationship with him is strictly contingent on how you interpret and perceive your experiences.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great question. And the way you ended it is exactly true, if anyone's being honest. At the end of the day, we have to make a choice, and we have to reach our own conclusion, right? So you have to invoke your reasoning faculties. You have to. We don't deny that. We don't neglect that.
But your reasoning faculty isn't enough to actually land on Yahweh. Would you not agree that you have to take a leap of faith at that point and say, hey, I can get this far, but in order for me to conclude that it's Yahweh and be convinced, I have to use faith?
That's another question altogether. So, okay, if you're asking for my epistemic grounding and why I believe Yahweh is the only true God, that's a different question. Is that what you're asking?
No, because as a Christian, you're going to use the trifecta that you said to draw that conclusion. I would have been able to draw that conclusion as well as a Christian. I'm asking, what made you initially take that leap to be convinced that it was Yahweh and not just some random?
Yeah, that's a separate question. So then now I have a personal experience. Like, I'll give you my experience. It's not, I wouldn't use this as an argument for God, but I'll give you my.
I don't really need the experience. All I need to know is that you had an experience.
Yeah, I had an experience.
You interpreted that experience as God. And I'm asking, how did you determine that it was God and not something else, or just your brain, or just an experience that you can't explain any other way?
So then it goes back to the epistemic grounding for why I think Yahweh is the only true God.
And your epistemic grounding then is faith.
No, that's not an epistemic grounding. You can't say faith. Faith does not.
On the one side, in one moment you're saying, you're right, it is insufficient to draw the conclusion that it's Yahweh, and then you say it has to be Yahweh based on epistemic grounding.
I'm sorry, can I just keep talking? I gotta text this person really quick. I'll come right back, I promise.
No worries.
So, Ellen, I think he said it before. He's not using faith. He's using the philosophical argument of contingency. Like, that's how he knows.
But not to get to Yahweh. He's using it to get to something.
Right.
I'm asking how it's Yahweh, and that is an illogical leap that requires faith to draw that conclusion.
Well, when he comes back, like make it clear that it's Yahweh, not just God, because he got to God through
making that clear, and he keeps going in circles. And he says, you're right. It can't be. You can't draw the conclusion that it's God with logic, but it's God because of his epistemology. And I'm like, it's literally circular reasoning at this point.
Right.
All I want him to do is admit that it's faith. It's literally just.
I wonder how much faith plays into this at all, because I believe he has yet to mention faith.
Well, no, of course he won't, because he knows that faith is a leap and is
perhaps
sufficient justification, and then that would destroy his epistemology.
Perhaps the Eastern Orthodox religion does not use faith.
Well, I would imagine they have a definition for faith. It's in the Bible.
Well, I think you'll have to clarify that when he comes back. Like, what is his role? What role does faith play in any of this for him?
There you go. We're going to ask that question. Maybe it's engaging people in truth. maybe that's the definition, which I'm still trying to get my mind around how that's faith. But hey. Anyway, well, hopefully didn't lose him permanently. This is a long text. Anyway, so when we started out, I was answering one of your questions before he popped on. I wish I could get back to that since we have time to fill here. And if somebody else in the room and they wanted to jump on, go ahead. We got about 20 minutes if H doesn't come back.
Yeah, I'm surprised we've been able to go a whole hour and 36 minutes with one caller.
Yeah, well, honestly, he's very pleasant.
Yeah, it's not bad.
No, it's very pleasant. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and have gotten some education on it too. So that was very helpful. So anytime you learn something, it's a good night. The Romans 9 thing, that's what we were talking about. So,
right.
So yeah, so for me, that was, in spite of all the threats and everything. Oh, well, never mind. We're back. H.
Hey guys, sorry. I'm going to give you guys we can carry on. I don't have too much more time, but I'm going to give you guys a follow. How often do you guys do this?
Every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, we'd love for you to call back, man. You were great.
Yeah, and make sure it's Eastern, 5 Eastern. Because
I'm on Eastern. I'm on.
Okay,
Eastern
good. Because I'm in Central Time, and it's caused me a lot of headaches making sure that I convert it 1 hour ahead.
Alan, you're in Argentina?
No. But my mom is from Argentina.
Oh, cool.
My dad's from Boston.
Your dad's from Boston?
No, from Russia. And somehow we met. That's the crazy story.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Where were we?
Well, I mean, we first of all, your legs are going to fall off tonight.
Bro, I'm going to get shredded is what's going to happen. I'm going to get a 6-pack after talking to you guys. It's going to be awesome. So thank you.
I'm actually starting to think I should get some. If I want to look like that, maybe this is the way to do it.
Dude, you guys should do this. Yeah, 5 o'clock. We can hop on our bikes. It'd be like a philosophical Peloton class. It'd be awesome.
Well, we'd have to do it from our phone.
It'd be like
that would be bad.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking.
We're all gonna get shredded. It's gonna be amazing.
Hey, we could do one of those. Hey, have you ever wanted to get shredded for the glory of God? The Lord is calling you to start a new ministry with us. Wait.
Oh, dude.
Wait.
Alan, there you go again, wanting to start a ministry just ad hoc, man, whenever you want. See, you can't help your Protestant roots, bro.
When you get a calling, you get a calling, man. I can't.
Peel.
Hey, we did have a question for you while we're gone.
Yeah.
We concluded everything for you while you were gone, so we already know.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. But can you tell us what role faith plays in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, and maybe a definition of it? Because it's in the Bible. I've kept coming back to faith with you, but maybe what your understanding of faith is.
Yeah, it'd be different. I think it's important to. Thanks for asking that question. It would be different than I think what you guys were, your flavor of Christianity. Faith for us is, very simply put, faithfulness. So it's not like mental assent into a leap in the dark, so to speak, right? Or like this trust factor thing. I'm not saying that it's devoid of that, But faith, from an Orthodox perspective, is more accurately defined as faithfulness. So when it says like you're saved by grace through faith, everything in our paradigm and frame is union and participation in the divine life. That's what it means for us to be saved. Like, again, it's not like a geographical location in the universe and like we made it, we're saved, like a some sort of safe space. That's a very Western kind of a idea, medieval, maybe sort of Dante's Inferno kind of thing. So yeah, I would say faith is defined as a participation, a faithful participation in the divine life.
Okay, so your definition of so would you take new perspectives on Paul or Auburn theology or anything like that? Because they sound very close to that definition.
Bro, I would take the opposite of new perspectives of Paul. We take ancient deposit of Paul. I would say all this other stuff that you're probably familiar with. I think I heard Eliot refer to Romans 9, which is obviously one of Paul's letters. Like Calvin teaches, double predestination and these sorts of things. These are not part of the apostolic deposit of the faith. This is referencing. It's a conclusion that is drawn absent from a ancient tradition. It has no place within Christianity for the first 1,500 years. You have a little bit of it again in Augustine and a tad in Anselm, but it was not part of the apostolic deposit. So no, to answer your question, it's not a new interpretation at all. It is the interpretation.
Well, a new perspectives on Paul. It's actually a theology that derives, even though it's called New Perspectives, but it's still based on this translation of faithfulness as opposed to being.
Oh, I've never heard that. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. What is it? What is it? New Perspective on
New
Paul?
Perspectives on Paul, and also Auburn Avenue. And I'm not sure anymore how closely they are related. They were different in some ways, but to my recollection, they both held very similar to faith being pistis in the Greek being translated as faithfulness.
Yeah.
To faith.
Exactly.
Although I do think there's places where faithfulness doesn't really quite squeeze in, so you have to use faith because otherwise you have some weird readings. But
would it be are you saying that faith is somewhat synonymous with like trust or belief?
So yes, faith. So faith is used kind of two ways that is common. One is confidence, like you say, I have confidence.
Assurance.
Yeah, I have confidence that my car is going to start today because every day it starts and I have no reason to think it won't. I have confidence the chair is going to hold me up. I have confidence that we're actually having a conversation right now. Like it's things that are based in reality, that are based in empirical data, evidence, things you can actually test. So it'd be like saying I have faith in my wife to get this award today, because I've seen how she works, I see how she does things, and I have every confidence that she's going to get it, that kind of thing. Versus the faith that has no empirical evidence whatsoever, but you draw a conclusion without sufficient justification. That is a common use of faith, and by and large, I am convinced that even for those who hold to the definition of pistis, the translation of pistis of faithfulness, whatever, I still think that most Christians, well, all Christians, in my opinion, are still making a leap of that faith that is drawing a conclusion without sufficient justification. So once you are a Christian, I know you're convinced you have sufficient justification because your epistemology is showing that it's logical and required, but you're still falling short of demonstrating empirically how you can get to Yahweh himself. And to your admission earlier, give us that you can't get there empirically. So what method are you using to actually draw that conclusion? And my answer would be faith, the kind of faith that I'm portraying, not pistis the way you're defining it.
Yeah, so let me just make sure I understand what you're saying is that basically, if you follow my argument to its conclusion, it still requires some level of trust in something that I don't know, that it just is. Is that more or less what you're saying?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. It'd be the equivalent to me believing leprechauns exist because there are rainbows, and so
Okay.
that would be the
Is
kind of faith that I would have to leap to because I see rainbows, therefore leprechauns exist, and that's an insufficient reason to believe leprechauns exist.
Okay, cool. So let's unpack this. So one definition that the scripture uses to define faith is the evidence of things not seen and the substance of things hoped for. So we would not ascribe faith as like the equivalent to you believing in a leprechaun at the end of a rainbow, because there would be no evidence for that. There'd be no reason for you to believe that. So faith devoid of reason is not the call of the Christian, where we just leave our logic and reasoning and check it at the door and just, by golly, believe what I said because that's what the Bible says. Like there's no frame for that in our world. In fact, we are commanded to test and study and seek the truth. And there's a promise that you will find it. And if you're not biased for it, this is actually how I came to faith, is by questioning everything. I told you guys that I was an atheist in high school. And so, no, I would not, I could not give an argument for that because it's not something that I believe, like a frame like that. I would never believe in God just because like somebody told me to, or because a book says to, like, without any evidence, without any logical implications.
You do think there is evidence. I'm simply saying it's
yeah.
It's like back to the leprechaun. Leprechauns walk on rainbows.
Okay.
If I see a rainbow, that is insufficient justification to draw a conclusion that therefore
correct.
Yes. However, that is the truth about leprechauns is they exist with rainbows. But that doesn't mean they really exist. It just means that's the myth that I've been promulgated, and I can believe it or not believe it.
Agreed.
The myth of God is, hey, look around you. Everything says there must be a God. It must be Yahweh. And you drew the conclusion that, oh, yeah, it must be Yahweh. And I'm saying that's insufficient justification to draw that conclusion.
You're correct. If I drew that conclusion in the same way, that would be equivalent to believing in the existence of leprechauns because there's rainbows, and somebody told me that this is why rainbows exist, then yes, that would be illogical.
Yes.
Correct.
And so what is the reason then that you have to determine that Yahweh is in fact the only God that exists?
Yeah, that would now go back to I'm sorry guys, but that would go back to the metaphysics, the transcendentals, beauty, truth, logic.
No, you're still not giving me Yahweh.
No, I am actually. Okay. So, beauty, truth, love, this thing that you feel between you and your wife, I could tell it's real by listening to you. You feel it, but you don't have a logical, even biological reason to be drawn to that specific woman, but something you find beautiful in her. And she finds something beautiful in you, enough for you to say, hey, we're going to hitch our wagons together and it's us until death, baby. So there's no logic. This is something now we're tying into the transcendentals, like beauty.
Okay.
So here's how this connects to Yahweh.
Okay.
So Yahweh as experienced and then documented in the scriptures gives an epistemic grounding for beauty, for truth, for logic, for goodness. That's why the fathers referred to him as the good, the true, and the beautiful. The horizon of all these things, they're not concrete, right? We can't grab beauty or grab this, but we can't also deny its existence. And so it's a logical necessity that the ultimate reality, you can call it God, you can call it, I don't care what you call it whatever name you want. But when I'm saying the word God, this is what I'm referring to, is not only do you need reality, not only do you need a non-contingent being, sorry, let me correct myself, not a non-contingent being, not only do you need non-contingent being in order for reality to exist, you need non-contingent being in order for logic, love, and transcendentals to exist. Otherwise, you have no epistemic grounding for these things to exist, and it's just subjective reasoning to you. And so that would be why I draw that conclusion.
But in all of that, you still said, and Yahweh is an epistemic grounding.
Sorry, if I said that, that's incorrect. But it'd be the epistemic grounding.
I still don't understand how you drew that conclusion.
It's a logical necessity.
No, it's not.
It is. So can you think of another way, if you have one, of what logic or love or beauty is grounded in?
It doesn't have to be grounded. That's what we've been arguing this whole time. You're drawing.
So if it's not grounded, then it doesn't exist. It's just an experience that you have in your mind.
No, it clearly exists. That we do know.
How does it exist?
And by exist, I don't mean like as a rock exists. I just mean in word, in how we talk about it. But it doesn't actually exist in reality. Go ahead.
Yeah, but you can't explain why or how it exists in your paradigm. So that's why I said
everything comes from the brain.
So that's the problem. So let's
that's
test
the problem.
This.
Do you have a subjective experience with logic?
Correct. Who? Oh, me?
You, yeah.
Oh, no, actually he does.
But you have affirmed these things through your own subjective reasoning.
No, I don't. I use subjective reasoning in order to ascertain truth, but it's not the grounding for how we can reason at all.
But your grounding itself is subjective, because all of us are trapped inside of our brains. The only way we experience reality at all is through this right here between our ears. Therefore, everything, including logic, is experienced subjectively. Your foundation is subjective. Everything is.
So this goes into, and I want you to understand, because if you guys are going to talk with other people metaphysics, you have to understand these category distinctions. So reasoning is subjective. Your reasoning is different than my reasoning, but that doesn't answer how we are able to reason at all, or why reasoning exists. So if you want to give an argument,
you're absolutely right. It doesn't tell us how. And to draw the conclusion of how is where you are either depending on what some book and some tradition tells you, because you've already drawn a conclusion that God exists.
So watch. So here's why this is important. This is where we differ. We meet in subjective reasoning is required in me for us to participate or to be aware consciously of something, right? It requires subjective reasoning, but this is where we go our separate ways. Your argument that the reason why we are reasoning is because it's in your brain. You don't have a grounding outside of yourself. That's why I said for you, logic is subjective.
Nobody has that.
Let me stress test that.
Let me demonstrate it real fast.
Yeah.
Everything that you just said, I have to evaluate myself and judge it to be correct.
Correct.
That means even your foundation is subjective.
But hold on. So watch this. So is 2 plus 2 equals 4? Is that a subjective claim or an objective claim?
It would have to be subjective, because
it's subjective.
Because we created mathematics and we have designed it to work.
This is a problem. You can't. So I say this in love and respectfully, that makes zero sense. If 2 plus 2 equals 4 to me subjectively, but in your mind 2 plus 2 equals 5, then we don't have any universals.
Well, that's not what I said. That's not what I meant.
So then if it's not subjective, then why couldn't I have in my mind, and my gray matter, in my little brain here, 2 plus 2 equals 5?
I think it would be objective that 2 plus 2 equals 4, but as a system by which we define it, it's mathematic, and we've subjectively put it together. But the laws of nature are what we have. Those objectively work because that's the way the system is. They don't have to have any other reason besides the fact that they're just here. And so whatever systems we've put together to understand how they work or to understand what they're called, that doesn't change the fact that they're just here. We have no choice but to work with them. What we do have a choice about is to try to make believe we have a reason for them.
No. So I would push back on that. So, okay, just so I understand purely, you would say that mathematics are universals. Like you and I don't get to say that 2 + 2 = 5 or whatever. Like they are what they are. Just like you said, natural laws.
I mean,
like, I don't get to.
I see where Elliot's coming from.
I don't think mathematics is a natural law. That's a tool that we created. It's like a ruler. Is an inch like something that we made up to measure things? Like that has to be necessarily subjective.
No,
now, we might agree that it is an objective unit amongst ourselves that we will use, but we had to create that measurement at one point, making it subjective.
So your argument, just so I understand, is that we human beings created mathematics.
Yes.
So here's like, look, if you can have this and you can have this, and you put them together.
I don't see how you could get out of that.
So prior to human beings existing, there was no such thing as mathematics.
How could there have been?
Right. How could there have been?
Okay. So if human beings did not exist, and there were, let's just say, like you believed in evolution, let's say there were 2 distinct planets. Are you saying that the number 2 or the concept of 2 or 1 + 1 = 2 things did not exist?
So that's what I'm trying to say.
There was no one to experience that.
That's a different question.
This plus this is always going to be the same amount.
Exactly.
But I think what Elliot,
you didn't create that. It's a
logic. We labeled those 1 and 2.
That's what I'm trying to say.
That's a separate thing.
You can call this 3 or you can call it 5, but it's still the same amount.
Yes. That's my point. I'm not talking about what we call it, like an inch. We invented a metric system and whatever the case might be.
Objectively, this is the same thing, but subjectively, it can be called 5. It doesn't matter, but go ahead.
Well, okay. If those 2 things that you just held up, is it universally true that those are 2 things, or is that subjective to your own conscious mind and experience?
You're confusing the map for the place. Mathematics is the map. The quantity is the place.
Okay, so I'm arguing for the map.
Then we no longer have math.
How can you have a place without a map?
Well, easily. No, I don't know how to get everywhere that exists.
No, the quantity is not math. We have created the system of math to label the quantities so that we can turn it into a system so that it's functional.
Okay, so yeah, you've created. I see what you're saying. You've created a map to traverse this place. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm arguing for the place.
Okay.
Now watch. Let's say mathematics, for example. This is an abstraction. Now, this is important. The number 2 does not exist in a concrete way, right?
Correct.
Like the number 2, or like a circle, like the circle. These are abstractions being generated from our consciousness and somehow from our minds. Somehow,
which is why math is subjective.
So watch, but this is where it falls apart. If you believe math is subjective, for some reason, we are all experiencing the reality of 2 + 2 = 4. When I count, I have 4 fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I have 4 things. You can count it. I can count it. Elliot can count it, right? This is not a subjective experience that you're having, even though you're using your subjective reasoning to see something or perceive something would be a better word. But universally, objects and math, this is out of necessity in order for us to even have any reality at all. Just like time, right? Time.
Hold on. You just said that's a necessity to have reality?
Mathematics.
Why is that a necessity to have reality?
Because if there's distinction between 2 parts, or if there's parts, there must be mathematics. It's inferred.
Mathematics is again, it's the map. We've already said that.
No. In your world, it's the map. I'm saying it's the place. The meanings we assign to it, like the word 2 or whatever we call it, That would be the map to try to explain where we are.
All right, so you're not saying mathematics as a system is necessary for reality. You're just saying
I'm saying the reality of math
will exist is necessary for reality.
Whether you and I exist or
I might
not,
switch it and say this is the result of reality, but okay, either way.
But I have to assume that we're both experiencing reality in exactly the same way. Like I don't know.
Bingo.
I have no way to demonstrate that or prove that.
Correct. You don't. I do.
No,
that's the point.
Claim to.
You don't either.
No.
Problem.
This is why I said if you don't have if you'll concede, then if you don't have a reason, then you just have to reduce everything to I don't know. So
yes,
you don't
have
correct. But again, this is why you might get pressed on this.
We're taking it a step further. We're saying you also don't know. We're saying
but
that
now
your foundation is incorrect as well.
Okay, so here's the point. How can you know what I know?
We don't know what you know. That's why we're asking you to demonstrate it, and you've yet to do that.
No, but I'm saying how can the fact that we can know anything at all presupposes something prior. I'm dealing with the prior. You're dealing with these distinctions.
No,
this is what we mean when we have an out.
That is not an absolute necessity. No, it's not.
What is not an absolute necessity?
That if we know something, that it absolutely presupposes something else.
Yes, of course it does.
Why?
What do you mean?
I don't. I mean, there's no way I can be 100% certain that I'm not the only thing that ever existed, and everything I have is in my head. Nothing's existed before me. I'm God.
So in your frame, you don't have a reason for why anything exists at all. Now, I have a reason. Now, what you're challenging is my reason. Hey, well, how can you know that? That's basically what you're saying.
And that's what I'm arguing is faith. And so you went to Hebrews 11:1, and you said faith is the evidence of things unseen, the assurance of things. What you're missing in that verse is that it says faith is the evidence. It's defining faith is the evidence. It's not saying faith in the evidence, nor is it saying faith is the confidence in the evidence. It says faith is the evidence. Your entire evidence for the existence of God, the unseen, the hope of assurance of eternal life, all that is faith. Faith is the evidence. That is what Hebrews 11:1 says.
That's a very literal way to translate that.
I'm sorry for interpreting it the way it's written. I'm not sure how else to do that.
I know.
Well, let me give you like an example of how I used faith when I was a Christian.
Okay.
So as a Christian, I had to. Well, I already believed because I was, raised that way. So I started off that way, but I saw faith as the last 10%. So if I were to build a bridge to God, because God is not present, he won't show up for me, but I have to get to God. So I would stack up all of the evidence, all of the arguments to build this bridge, like prophecy, answered prayer, miracles, the infallibility of Scripture, the philosophical arguments like contingency or transcendental argument or whatever you want. And I would get all the way about 10% to God. I couldn't get that last 10% because like God still isn't present. So I have to take that last leap on faith. And faith is a virtue, according to Scripture, according to my interpretation of it, as that would get me all the way to God. So the reason I'm not a Christian is I put all of those components of the bridge under scrutiny, and one by one, they all fell apart until I was all the way back at zero. And now I have to take it on faith all the way. There is no bridge. And that was a bridge too far for me.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that. I had the same experience myself. We arrived to different conclusions, but again, anybody can believe whatever they want. That's their prerogative.
You had the same experience. So you definitely started your journey with God with that 10% leap of faith.
Oh, no. I mean, I probably started mine with like a 90% of the faith in like bridge. Like,
and that's all I was trying to argue for is that
But that's not what I'm doing now, though. That's the difference.
That's fine. Now, as a Christian, you think you have the strong epistemology, and it's convincing to you because you're already convinced God exists by faith. So you already are a Christian. You already believe God exists. You've already bought into that.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding your argument, but you're saying that I believe these things because I'm presupposing that I'm Christian, where I would reverse the order. I believe these things first and arrived at Christianity. That's the difference. I'm not just saying things because I'm a Christian and this is like the Christian thing to do. I care about truth. So if you could demonstrate for me that Christianity,
I have no doubt
Yeah.
you do, and I have no doubt.
But this, just so you know, just so where I'm at, like for me, all I care about is truth. If Christianity weren't true, I would not believe it.
Well, you're well on your way. But listen, I'm absolutely. I have no doubt that you are convinced of that you love truth. You seem to be a truth seeker. I can understand it. As a Christian, I did exactly what you do, and I kept studying. And I'm not trying to say that because like, hey, you're going to follow my lead. I just mean like I sensed that from you because I was there too, and I would never say that I didn't seek truth, even though I was a Christian. I obviously did, and then eventually I landed here. But but the only case I'm trying to make is that your initiation into a life of that believed in God was faith. You started there
initially, yeah,
and you were already convinced that God exists. What you did with that God is you made sense of him, and you found a religion, a denomination that brought logic to the God that you already believe exists.
God, I understand what you're saying. No, so I was inferring that when I was in high school, when I was an atheist, in my upbringing as a child, they would drag me to church, and I believed that's what I meant by the 90% bridge. Then I said, I went through your process basically, and I was just like, dude, there's no reason for me to believe, and I don't care. I became very nihilistic in that period. I just didn't think there was any meaning to life or whatever. But then I began to be curious, and what I did on my journey is I said, okay, well, I was watching like this TV show on the Discovery Channel, and it was talking, you ever seen like the map where it shows the Earth and then the sun, and then the sun like goes to this other star, and it's like all this thing. And for me, I recognize order, and I was like, this is interesting to me. How do you explain the order? And I understand that this is like a perception thing, right? I admit that. But there seems to be this order. We can depend that tomorrow, these laws of the universe, right? Like we know, we believe tomorrow there's going to be gravity. We're not just going to float off into outer space, right? There seems to be some sort of order to this reality. And so I prayed. I remember I was like, God, if you're real, I don't care what the Bible says, my mom says, the pastor said, show me, I want to know you. And I studied every religion and arrived to the conclusion after that. So I just wanted to clarify, it's not presupposing based on the fact that I'm a Christian. And then I deconstructed for the last 5 years. I was ready to be like, hey, is this even real?
So what I'm gathering from this, and this is my perception, and I'm just going to make this comment, and then you can respond if you wish, and then LA can close us out with his last comments. We definitely need to end at some point here, and then I hope you come back, because I'm certain after what I'm about to say, it will open up a whole new can of worms.
Okay.
But my perception of what you did is you were inundated with faith. You were indoctrinated with faith as a method by which you can draw a conclusion that God exists. We all were. We grew up in a culture that just did that to us. Whether or not you were raised in a home like that, it doesn't matter. We were all raised like that. That never left you. It didn't leave me for years. I had to fight it off all the way until I was 42 when I finally, lost my faith and became an atheist. But with that presupposition that God exists, with faith as your method, you never actually became an atheist. You think you did, because you turned away from what you believed was God and you lived a different way and you thought you were an atheist. But atheists' first conclusion when they look up and say, hey, this looks interesting, isn't to pray and talk to God and ask if he's real. We don't even consider God as an option because he's not our first go-to. Nature is, natural evolution is. We just start there. We're not looking for some supernatural explanation. Your inclination was to say, hey, God, if you're up there, show me. And because you already have faith and you were in a situation of either trouble, tension, or transition, I'm going to guess transition based on what you're explaining, then God, the faith area of your life kicked in again, and God was your conclusion. He never left. It's just faith got suppressed for a while, and then the method came back, and you revived God again, and then you went from there on your journey. So I'm not convinced you were an atheist, even though you say you are, and I know we're just supposed to believe. But that's my perception of your story and how it went down. Because again, atheists don't look for God as their conclusion. naturalism is. So anyway, that's what I think. But again, ultimately, all I wanted to get to was that your life began with faith, and that's an important admission because Hebrews 11:1 says faith is the evidence of things unseen. It is the assurance of hope. And if you don't, well, maybe next time you can give us your interpretation of Hebrews 11:1 because I'm curious now. But go ahead, you can respond to that, and I'll let Elliot have the last word.
Yeah, I would say you're respectfully projecting onto me your experience, unless you're suggesting that once you become atheist, you can never question your belief. I don't see how it would logically follow that unless you have some dogma or some belief that once you're an atheist, you're always an atheist. I just don't think that's true. I think there's many people that have changed from atheism to Christianity, but
well,
so
I think they claim to, and I think as a skeptic, you can only. My conclusion is, if you're skeptical, you're going to end up being an atheist. I don't think it's possible not to be. And then yes, I think if you're an atheist,
then it's a permanent thing. You stop thinking. You can't.
No, I don't say you stop thinking. That's not at all what I'm saying.
Okay.
You're so skeptical. You're just not leaping initially to God. Now, if I were to hear evidence for the existence of God
that was my next question,
I obviously would change my mind. But to date, there isn't any sufficient evidence. And and right, but I think the reason
to me there was
right because you were already inundated with faith, and you already
but that's why I say respectfully, at some level, subjectively, you have something that would constitute for you to, hey, if something happened, then I would stop being atheist, or at least question my belief, because what is it? It's just a belief.
But it would have to be sufficient justification, and I'm still seeing insufficient justification.
Yeah, but I don't get to say, just like I don't get to say for you what is sufficient evidence. You are the only one that gets to say that for you, and so therefore you can't project onto me what is sufficient evidence, because that is a subjective claim. Sufficient evidence for you is different than what it is for me. Maybe my sufficient evidence is higher than yours. Yours is lower. Yours is higher and mine is lower. It doesn't matter. It's subjective. That's the point.
And that's fair. And God may have somehow opened your eyes to see that, and I'll never know because He doesn't seem to want to do that for me. But
do you want to see it?
If it was true, yes. I want the truth. Absolutely.
So have you prayed that prayer?
Why would I pray? I don't believe a God exists.
So
and I was a Christian for 42 years. Believe me, I prayed a lot. And before I became an atheist, I begged God to reveal Himself to me because He was quickly fading, and He just didn't show up when I was desperately the most desiring of that. So yeah, I found that
I can't argue with that. I mean, I think that's your experience, and I think it's a valid experience. I just say, if I want to know the truth, nothing is off the table.
Agreed.
Nothing.
100%.
Even Orthodoxy, Christianity, I don't care what it is. Nothing is off the table. And that's my shred my beliefs. Let's examine this. And so I'm not afraid to be wrong. And I'm also not. I don't hold on to everything with a closed hand. So I think it's important to practice some intellectual humility and say, hey, look, you know what? I could be wrong, but this is why I believe what I believe now. And I welcome the conversation to be convinced otherwise, because ultimately I want the truth.
Yeah, I love that, dude. And me too. And I actually coined a term, and I have it in my book. I used to preach it all the time. I call it fluid dogma.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool.
So yeah, I am with you 100%. And that's why I think this conversation is doable with you, because you actually care. And it's pretty awesome. Unless you have anything else you'd like to respond to that.
No, man, I just appreciate you guys, dude. You're super cool. I'm not just saying that. Like, again, I think it was a fruitful discussion.
Before you close out, I did
you get the last word, Elliot. I was just giving him a chance to do whatever he wanted to.
Yeah, I'll let him have the last word after I ask him my final question.
Okay.
So you have this. You mentioned this trifecta, the three-legged stool that props up your beliefs, and one of them is what? Church tradition. The other is
scripture, tradition, and reason.
Okay, the reason part. Is the reason part mostly made up of philosophical arguments, like the grounding argument and contingency?
I would say logic, yeah. Philosophy, logic. Yeah. Reasoning is the faculty of. Yeah.
If you took one of those legs away, let's say you became persuaded that the logic argument didn't hold water anymore, would you still be an Orthodox Christian?
Hell no.
So any of the three fall and you're out.
Dude, just like any three-legged stool, yeah. If you I would never remove, and nor does the church, nor do I believe God would ever want you to remove your reasoning faculties that he created you to have. So yeah, I would not subscribe. That drove me away. It probably drove you away. It drives everyone away. Like, who wants to, you have legitimate questions, tough questions too, that people have been debating. And then the pastor just said, oh, well, just believe it. Like, screw you. No.
See, my problem is that third leg, the logic and reason, those philosophical arguments, those were part of my 90% bridge. And they still didn't get me all the way to God like they are for you, because I just couldn't see how a philosophical argument could prove the existence, or an abstract concept could prove the existence of an actual being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or an actual object.
Thank you.
Until God would show up, like, I'm still behind the curve.
Yeah. And again, this is why definitions matter, and why purging ourselves from this Protestant Western view of God is why it is truly inept. It is new and doesn't have any grounding in church history. And you don't have to believe me. You can research this yourself. But when you say a being or an object, we're already smuggling in a presupposition that holds no water. So I think that you guys both value logic and reasoning. You guys have had a very intellectual back and forth with me, and you're not just making up, like, this was not an emotional conversation. None of us got emotional here, except when Alan said that he loved his wife, man. Ooh, I love that. How long you been married, real quick?
Well, married November 2nd of this past year, but we've been together for going on 5 years now.
What took you so long, bro?
Well, we don't really care about marriage. To us, it's just a title, because it turned out that we needed to get married for her and the kids to have insurance, and so it was a.
So you did it.
Yeah.
But you've been married before, though, Alan.
I was married for 20 years, 19 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
It didn't take you that long to get married.
That's true. No, I was talking about to his rib, to his queen, to his bride. So I hear what you're saying, Elliot. And next time we talk, I'd love to unpack that a little bit more, because.
Well, you can change it from object or being and just change it to God. Like, I can't get to God through philosophy.
Okay, there's a great message on this, and we could close with this. I do not endorse the guy I'm about to say in his teachings, because we just do not believe in the doctrine. However, he has a great argument for this against a Harvard professor, and it's called The Existence of Shoes. Have you heard this?
No.
By R.C. Sproul?
No.
So he takes, we'll end with this. He takes off his shoe in the debate, and he says, this shoe categorically, emphatically proves the existence of God. And the whole auditorium erupted in laughter. And then he proceeded to give a sound argument for the existence of God that left the crowd stunned. So we can carry on with that later, but that's why I would say that God is a logical necessity for anything to exist at all. Otherwise, you have no explanation for why anything exists at all, and you can have that. But if you take serious the question, why does anything exist at all, and you truly want to know, then it's going to require that you enter into the realm of metaphysics and philosophy, because there is no empirical way. Just like there's no empirical way that I can prove that Alan loves his wife empirically. You
God
can't prove that.
Provide one, though.
No, because
he has in the past. According
empirically, did the Egyptians believe that God was real and submit to him? I mean, how many people have experienced?
What I mean is, he's showed up many times, if you're to believe the Bible. So he has the ability.
But my suggestion is Alan having 20 years in the saddle as a pastor, he probably did experience some things. I assume you'd have to, with his how his mind works. And I could be wrong. Maybe it was completely upon blind faith. But I think, again, this is not an empirical endeavor. This is a metaphysical endeavor. I'm not saying it doesn't have material substance. In reality, it does. But you can't get to God just like you can't get to love through a test tube or a laboratory.
And I agree 100%, which is why I'm arguing faith is the method. It has to be, because there is no other that works.
And I would say that metaphysics and logic and reasoning, it can be ascertained. And in actual fact, it is of necessity. Otherwise, you have no logical argument. There is no logic, and it's a self-refuting argument. So, but we can carry this on, guys. You guys are awesome.
You were very eloquent. Stick around for just a second, because hey, if everybody wants last minute here to throw up a couple of super chat questions for us, even for our guest, because he was very awesome tonight. I'm sure he wouldn't mind answering, just to help out support Skeptic Haven. If you're interested, in the meantime, while you're throwing those into the chat, I want to remind you tonight we have the thought experiments. It is coming up right after this at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. Tonight's debate is the resurrection of Jesus with Bryce Aroni and Greg. I can't see his last name, unfortunately, because it is covered by my thing, Greg Rogers. And then Jaya Warren is going to be moderating. So don't miss that tonight. And then, of course, as in every week, it is us here on Skeptic Haven as well, and also on our own channel if you want to stream it there. We have the Deconversionists every Friday at 5 p.m. And perhaps we will continue with our guest H at some point if he's able to come back, because tonight was fun. Bro, I swear to God, I'm going to start lifting while we work out.
Correct. Bro, don't swear to somebody that doesn't exist, bro.
Fair point. Hey, we're going to change our show title. It could be called Wait Till We Wait. And that's what we're going to be doing.
I like that. I like that.
All right. I don't see any super chats coming in, so I guess we're going to call it a night. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was great. H, I mean, you were our guest tonight, so it was really awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. You are a worthy opponent. I will give you that.
I appreciate you guys. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me too. Very respectful, very fun to talk to you. Talk to you soon, man. Elliot, as you know, every Christian has their own version of Christianity. We're here to unravel your conversion. See you next week, everybody.